And joining us now is Patrick Theros. Patrick, as you know, former ambassador in the Middle East, U.S. ambassador to Qatar, and he's also a senior advisor to the Gulf International Forum, and he's had a career in the United States Foreign Service as a senior diplomat. Ambassador Theros, thanks for being with me today, and my apologies. I know your wife, not a happy camper.
It's okay. I'll survive. I've been married 43 years.
Well, you got about, 32. You've been married 43. You got about a baker's dozen on me, so I understand. Mr. Ambassador, I really wanted to get your thoughts on this Iranian situation, and kind of fascinating, the military advisors and the neocons in the White House advising the president. They had a series of military strikes against Iran planned. Ships were in place. Missiles were in place. Everything was there. And it was supposed to be launched today at dawn in Iran. The president, 7:30 p.m., gave the stand-down order, thought about it, changed his mind, wanted to try a more measured, thoughtful, diplomatic approach, and Oman acting as the intermediary. Did the president make the right decision in your judgment, Ambassador, or should he gone ahead with a strike?
I could not agree with the president more. This is bordering on the insane. It is so, they're so obvious that there are people in the administration who, for a variety of reasons, most of them bad reasons, would like to go hit Iran. They are people who have pretty much fooled themselves into believing that, you can give the Iranians a bloody nose and not suffer for it. I can tell you from all my friends in the military, active and retired, that nobody thinks this will turn out right. That nobody thinks it'll be a nice, clean strike. We kill some Iranians, we blow up some missiles and so forth, and everything returns to normal, and the Iranians sit there, lick their wounds, and don't do anything. That's not the way this world operates. Now, having said that, I'm also afraid that there are probably some people on the Iranian side who would like to bring down the Iranian government by provoking an incident with the United States. So these guys are really in cahoots with each other. I don't know if it's, if they're calling each other, but it sure looks like they are, they're working in the same direction. There are people on both sides who are trying to provoke a war. The Iranians have kept a lid on it. We, being a democratic country, tend to sort of swing back and forth on what we're doing. Mm-hmm. But as I said in an earlier program, I personally think the president ought to fire John Bolton.
I couldn't agree more. I'm not a fan of his, and he's made a series of bad decisions and given bad advice over a long, extended period of time. And the fact that he's still around and taken seriously is really shocking to me, sir. I just have to be honest with you. You just look at the facts. But I want to go back to the Unholy Alliance that you just talked about. Be a little more specific on this. Who are the players in that?
Okay, well, on the United States side, there is it's the neocons version 2. It's the people who believe that we can impose liberal democratic values on other countries at the point of a bayonet. We've been trying this for a really long time. It's never worked. And then they, in turn, because most of them are people who've never seen combat, are still mesmerized by the idea that you can bomb people into submission. For those of us who are old enough to remember Vietnam, you remember we were going to bomb them back to the Stone Age, and the air war by itself would take care of things. So that's what's happening on our side. And on the other side, you have, in dictatorships, you have different people trying to maneuver. If you remember, again, a long time ago, there was an incident where the Israelis caught a woman who had been talked by her boyfriend into bringing a bomb on board an El Al airliner.
Yes.
And it traced it back to the Syrian ambassador in London. Well, the Israelis concluded that this was because all the evidence out there was so obvious that the Syrians weren't dumb enough to do it that way. This thing was way out of character for the Syrians. And the Israelis concluded that there were elements inside the Syrian government, or inside the Syrian regime, that were trying to bring down the then dictator Hafez al-Assad by provoking a major war with Israel. And therefore, the Israelis decided, unlike other cases where when they catch people doing things, there's always retaliation, in this case, the Israelis said, no, we're not going to, this has nothing to do with us. This is an internal Syrian dispute. This is the same thing. The hardliners, the people who opposed the JCPOA at the beginning, the people who have opposed any sort of rapprochement with the United States, they're the mirror image of the people in the United States who can't get over 1979 and the taking of the hostages in the embassy. They clearly are losing popularity inside the country because their influence has made Iran, which is potentially an extremely rich and prosperous country, lots of smart people, lots of good agriculture, good, pretty much everything good, in theory. They've been losing popularity, so the only thing they've got going for themselves is hostility towards the American enemy. So the more they can build up the American enemy, the happier they are, because they figure that this will enable them to stay in power. And so they would love to have a situation whereby the Americans hit Iran and Rouhani and the people who don't want trouble, who don't want a war, who are trying to figure some way out of this, are removed from power. And I think the incident with the drone illustrates perfectly the possibility. I don't know what happened. I don't know whether the drone was over international waters or over Iranian airspace. But I can write two scenarios. Mm-hmm. First scenario is there are people pushing the U.S. Navy to be aggressive in the Defense Department, from Secretary of State, on the civilian side, pushing the U.S. Navy to be aggressive, pushing the U.S. military to be aggressive, and saying, you fly that drone as close as you can, you stay within range of Iranian anti-aircraft missiles, and hope that somebody is dumb enough to shoot at us. And on the other side, on the Iranian side, I can say people saying, look, if it's within your range and the Americans give you a target, let's teach them a lesson and go shoot it down. So I can see both sides, elements within both sides, mm-hmm. who would love who love what happened. The Iranians shot down a drone. The people who would push the drone to be as provocative as possible on our side, people in the Iranian side who say, why don't you reach out and provoke the Americans? Mm-hmm. And that's what makes this dangerous. That's what makes this really dangerous. It is a certain lack of discipline on both sides. The people running the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are people who want to get rid of their government. The next layer down in the Department of State, and we're trying to say, Trump's cabinet, unfortunately, is full of people who, for their own ideological reasons, want to provoke a strike on Iran. I think these guys have really short-term. Maybe that's not true, but they have attitudes that push them that way. And there's this moment I got on my Facebook page yesterday, and I said Trump's the only adult left in the White House, mm-hmm. when he said the drone wasn't all that important.
I mean, it's a drone. I mean, it's $100 million. Yeah. They could just cut him a check.
Yeah, it's expensive, but in the end, you haven't killed anybody.
But I mean, it's a drone, and yeah. Even though all the evidence says it was in international waters, there is also evidence that the Iranians, the Iranian Navy, is picking pieces of it up in Iranian waters. So, yeah. At least that says that it was close, because some of the damaged piece of the drone is in Iranian waters. I mean, it just didn't get there if it was 100 miles away. So it had to be close. So, but I did. I saw your Facebook page, and you said that the presence of the adult in the room. You know what's fascinating, Ambassador? By the way, we're with Ambassador Patrick Theros, former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Qatar and career a senior diplomat with the United States in the Foreign Service, now senior advisor to the Gulf International Forum. You know what's fascinating here is on Monday on my show, before any of this happened, was another former ambassador to Qatar. I came before you, I believe, and that was Chase Uttermeyer.
No, he was after me. He was after me.
He was after you.
Chase is a young guy.
Yeah, he came after you. Right, so both of you ambassadors to Qatar, both of you serving different administrations. And what was fascinating is he said to me that he said, this is pure conjecture, but he said there are elements in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that he said, my conjecture is they shot the holes in those tankers without central authority command in Iran in order to provoke a response to get regime change. He said that Monday. So now you're basically saying the same thing. I find
absolutely the same thing.
And I doubt you guys have had.
No, we have not had a conversation in the last couple of weeks.
Right. So I mean, here's two former ambassadors to the Gulf in an important country, a big U.S. ally in the Gulf, saying the same thing. So the president stands down. Both of us think that was the right decision. What happens now, Mr. Ambassador?
I think that we're stuck on this. What's the gerbil running in the wheel called? I keep forgetting that term. We're doing the same thing over and over again on both sides. When I say we, I'm talking about the larger number of people in the U.S., in Iran, and amongst some other people on the outside who would like to have a war between the United States and Iran for their own benefit. All these, they're all running the same story. So right now, what really, keeping our powder dry is really important. I think the story that they were all geared up for a strike on Iran this morning, it probably overstates it a bit because, the U.S. military is really good at what they do. And even if they don't want to do it, they're always got a plan to do it. Mm. So I'm sure that there's, I know for a fact that there are contingency plans out there. Mm-hmm. And so you pull down contingency plan A21, and you tell the Navy and the Air Force, get ready for it, and they will get ready for it. Whether or not they want to is another story, because they don't push back. Our military is completely apolitical. Mm-hmm. Right. But I think there's a slight exaggeration in that they had everything ready for an unprecedented strike on Iran. I also don't think that if you really want to go strike Iran and want to do the kind of damage that hopefully would limit the Iranian response, you got to have a heck of a lot more forces in the area than we do. One carrier battle group, that's 100 airplanes, and another 50 airplanes flying out of friendly air bases is not enough for a very serious campaign.
So you're of the belief now that the president did the right thing. One thing you said earlier, and I just want to ask you about this, Mr. Ambassador, and I know you have to take off, but you said the contingent in the U.S. that is looking for conflict with Iran, let's not call it war, conflict, that are in favor of dropping bombs on them and having a muscular response to whatever happened. I get the motivation, which you said, of the Revolutionary Guard. They're looking for regime change. I get that. That makes sense. What is the motivation of the neocons running around?
I think on the neocon side, it's more ideological. It's much more, we're doing God's work. We have to spread democracy, and we have to change the world in our image, which is sort of less morally bad, but let me tell you, a lot more dangerous.
Mm-hmm. And it's failed. That's
and
the
it's failed.
thing. And it's failed.
Yeah, it failed in Iran. It failed in Iraq.
Yeah.
Iraq was a classic example of that. I remember in the lead-up to the Iraq War, conversations I'd have with people who wanted to go to war, and you asked them why, and said, we want to create, a democratic Iraq. And, I will go out and take another drink every time they tell me that.
Because it was impossible. Like you said, you can't do that at the point of a bayonet. I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked three guests, because you have to go back to history. History is a predictor of the future. And I started this morning at 6 a.m. with this. I opposed the first war, George H. Bush. I didn't think it was our business to defend Kuwait. And I also thought that April Gillespie, the ambassador to Iraq at the time, screwed the whole thing up by not being forceful enough with Saddam Hussein at the time. And I opposed the second war unequivocally. So that's kind of where I stand. But the whole WMD thing, was the intel just incompetently wrong, or were we lied to?
We're lied to.
Thank you. Why?
Because of the same thing. God told us to go transform the Middle East into Kansas, into a democratic state.
Wow, unbelievable.
And then I really feel sorry for Colin Powell, who I think is one of the best people we've ever had, because Colin Powell didn't understand that he was no longer a soldier, obeying orders.
So you believe that when he made that speech, that very impactful speech at the UN, that he knew that there were no WMDs in Iraq?
The most charitable thing I can think of is that, one, he was obeying orders. Two, the order was issued with the good of the United States in mind, and therefore he had to obey orders. It's like the platoon leader who was ordered over the top into a machine gun fire. He knows it's a suicide mission, but he's doing it because he has been ordered to do it, and he trusts his commanding officers to be doing the right thing.
Unbelievable. Thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Ambassador. I really appreciate it. And that's why
Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate it as well, the opportunity.
A lot of us are suspect about this whole thing. Thanks for your insight. John Fredericks Radio Network. We'll be right back.